we'll get started. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the North Carolina Museum of Art. My name is Ollie Wagner. I'm the studio manager. As a lot of you guys know, we're recording this, and I will get the link out to everybody next week, hopefully by Tuesday or Wednesday. If you guys have any questions during the demo and you guys want to ask the panelists directly, if you look at the bottom of your computer, there's a button that says Q&A. You can use that and that will queue questions up. You can also use the chat feature to ask questions directly. You can ask them to me and I can ask the panelists for you guys. But we will put some time aside for Q&A at the end as well. All right, so moving along, we got a really exciting guest today. Our guest today is artist Sara Rahbar. She's a New York City artist. Her CV covers like way too many things for me to notice her. She shows all over the country though, and internationally as well, and exhibits in museums. So I'm like super excited. I've been following her on Instagram for a while, and I was just really excited that she's agreed to come out. Sara, are you all set to go?
Yeah, first of all, I didn't know you follow me on Instagram.
Yeah, totally.
Send me a message so I know which one's, if I don't know if it's your name or some secret message, some secret name. Thank you for following me. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much. I'm going to go into my sharing screen because everything for me is visual. And first of all, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Whoever signed up for this demo, I'm really excited to share my work with you. I love these kind of things because it's almost like it makes it more accessible. Like I see artworks all the time and I'm always like, how did they do that? Like, what's behind it? You always want to know. And I just try to be as honest and authentic as I can be to help everyone to make things, because for me, that's been something that's saved me from myself and from like my life and from, making, I can get pretty like, crazy. So the work just kind of like sustains me and brings me to a really calm and happy place, and meditation for me. So let me share my screen and start, because for me with beginning with the flags, it really is going to make the collage make more sense. Okay, I think it's happening now. Okay, Oliver, just confirm with me that you see the flag, right?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. So I chose this image because this is literally, I think this is like flag number 1. It was like the first thing I ever made. And for me, this is the foundation for the collages. Like, it's a foundation for the sculpture. It's a foundation for everything, because it was like the first work that I ever made. And it's the same thing. I find things. It took me 2 decades to really understand myself, what I do. But I'm going to go to the next image as I talk. But to me, it's just, for all the work, it's the same process of collecting objects and piecing them together in a way that makes sense to me. And I started with actually photography and painting. And it always left me incomplete. It always felt like, not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, for me, everybody has to find what works for them. And for me, I always felt like I wanted to stick things onto them. Like even the photography, I wanted to, I would frame it, break the glass, pour polyurethane on it, write on top of it. With the paintings, like objects, I would write text, and it just always felt like there's something off. And it was because I needed to move to objects. And when the flag series began, for me, it just made everything came together. It just made sense. All I did was, and I have to say, I'm not particularly a big fan of textiles. They're very soft and fragile, and they can rip and burn. But at the same time, at that time, it made the most sense to me. And it was always a combination of textiles and objects. And I was in London studying, and 9/11 happened, and it was just a reaction to my surroundings and what was happening. And as I started collecting and piecing it together, the flag series came about. I didn't think I was going to do more than one piece. And I'm just showing a few just to show also the progression, because this is a body of work that's been going on since I think 16 or 17 years. And it's only about 59 or 60 works. So like, let's say 60 works in, 16 years. And they became very dark. This was one of the last flags that I did. So the first one was like some in 2005, and this one was in 2021, I think. And you can see how the color and all of the beauty and I guess brightness kind of washed away, and it became very dark and militarized and more about military and weapons. There's still like a lot of like details, like, intricate little, like there's like Jesus Christ and little decorative things that they decorate like these parts, horses and animals with. But at the most, for me, it wasn't about it being beautiful anymore. It was just, and these are all coal mine workers, tags, and I work with a lot of tags, whether it's the ones they use for animals in factory farms or people in prisons or coal mine workers. It's always there are always numbers on tags, and they make me very uncomfortable and upset, and I use them in my work a lot. You can see a lot of those tags in this flag, and this was a later flag as well. And you can see, again, these have become much, much more darker than where I started. But for me, again, this could have very well been a collage. Like, I want to get to that place with these collages where it's paper, but it's, like I could use maybe not the metal, but like the tags, the name tags, those are light. I could glue those on, I could layer those on. It's always the same process, finding things and figuring out a way to piece them together in a way that, first of all, it just works, where they're not, ripping and falling off. Because I always, since the beginning, I always think long-term, and I always think art history, and I always think museums, and I always think this work has to last for years. I don't know why. That's just always been ingrained in me. And I always think, okay, if whatever I'm doing, even if it's sewing, I use like really heavy duty things that are going to stand the test of time. Like the thread, everything's very heavy and strong. So even the textiles and stuff, I never use like silk or something that's very soft. They're always very heavy duty, thick canvases, things that are not going to fall apart or rip apart. From the flag series, I'm just giving you a background. I went to the war series, and the war series, again, this is the collage. This is the painting. It's always been about color, composition, and you can see how kind of like, it's all so organized. I mean, for me, at least, it makes sense. I move these objects around compulsively for sometimes a day. It comes together, sometimes hours, and sometimes it sits on my studio table for a year. It really depends. When I show you the pieces in my studio, some of these pieces, like I couldn't, it's been sitting here for 2 years, and I can't get to this place where, like, this piece, it's done, like, without a doubt. Everything makes sense, everything is in its place, and I couldn't add a single extra object because it just wouldn't make sense to me. This is the war series, and I always want to try to say more with less. But, sometimes this happens where I'm collecting these objects, right? So it's like, it's also, what am I, what am I coming across? Like, it's a random thing. I'll be in Pennsylvania, I'll be in Massachusetts, it's what's on the table at the flea market, or the person that I run into that's a, veteran, and they want to sell something. And it just depends what I come across. And I just collect, these things pile up. And to me, this was like this was like a boot mold, and this hose was just, it couldn't been more perfect. It's like intestines, and the masks were just perfect. It's like two people sleeping in a bed. Of course, I don't realize it until I let the objects just kind of like come together on their own. They kind of like, it just makes sense when I start putting them together, and it takes a while, but they just come together like pieces to a puzzle. Again, this is a toy, from a child's toy. This is something that they used to carry things in, I think it was World War I. They were like for carrying like heavy material, and they put them on their backs. And this was a beautiful Jesus Christ that I just came across on a cowbell. And, maybe to someone else, it doesn't make sense, but to me, this makes absolute sense. It couldn't make more sense. So, And then from, this is, I'm just showing you I think the four major bodies of work that led to the collages. That kind of, it also shows the progression, because I went from textiles to, the collected objects, and then the collected objects became the confession series, which is the bronze works, which these are my hands, my arms cast in bronze. Just to be technical, it's white bronze, and I pour ammonia on it and I beat it up. And I like everything to be, from the collages to the flags to the bronze works, everything. I like it beat up. I like it worn down. Life is messy and it's rough and it's barbaric, and I like the work to reflect that. I like the work to reflect life, and I don't want it to be polished and clean, because that's not, the reality for me, at least for my life. So again, these are just collected objects that became too heavy to have on paper or to have on canvas. Like I couldn't sew these. There was not much else. It was just a very organic progression to sculpture. And these are my hands cast in these tense kind of like gestures. When I get anxiety, when I get stressed, when I get depression, they just kind of like crumple up together, like, and it was a very, when I went to the Foundry, it was just the most natural thing for me. I knew immediately what I was doing, and it was hands and feet and in these really uncomfortable positions. Because I'm just generally, I guess, uncomfortable, and I wanted the work to reflect that discomfort that I feel and that I see in the world. This actually was my hands with my mother's, and very rarely do I do other people's body parts, but I want to start doing that more and more. But it's never really about me or the person that comes to the Foundry with me to cast their body parts, whatever it is. It's about the human condition. And this piece was called Stay. And there's just, it was a collected object that I found that led to this piece. It was these chains, and I could have actually sewn these, but there wasn't much else I could do. And the image of these two hands, it was just immediate. And that's how the work is for me. It's very immediate. It comes very strongly, and it's an image. Sometimes it's a title, and I have to act really fast or it just keeps me up at night. Almost done with this body of work. This is just a mask, and this was a tool that they used to, I think, remove hot things from, like, whether they were welding or from, like, let's say like a fireplace or something like that, hot objects. And it was just, I just wanted to make a person in pieces. It's called the Victor, and these objects helped me to piece these body parts together. I cast the knee, I cast the feet, the head, and then it just, I find the objects to help me bring the piece together. The objects always tell me what to do. And this was actually two separate sculptures that I did that just sat there, and I felt like, how can I, and bronze is so immediate. It's not like collage where you could just rip it up and throw it out. It's not like textiles even, where you can tear it up and start again. It's very definite. So it's very frustrating when things don't come out the way you envisioned it, because it never actually comes out the way you envisioned it, because once bronze is cast and all the little details that go into it, just, it's always a surprise, and you have to be ready to kind of work with that. You have to kind of surrender to it, to the process. So this was two separate sculptures that one day I just was like, oh my God, I messed this up so bad. And I put them next to each other, and they told me that they need to come together. And once they came together, it just made all the sense in the world. But it took about a year and a half for me to be able to see it. I didn't have the eyes to see. And the piece is called We Are All We Have. And here's a piece from another body of work that I did, confession series, where it's the bronze and a lot more wood and collected objects. The confessions, I would say the bronze dominates, but here the objects dominate. It's back to I think the flag series and the war series, where the objects are just dominating. And I think because with the war series and the flag series, I worked with a lot of prosthetics, arms and legs. I came to see how important and how lifelike it can become when you have hands and when you have feet, and sometimes, other body parts and head and things like that. But I couldn't get to that place where I wanted to get to in my mind with the prosthetics. So that's when I realized I need like when you see these pieces close up, the hands have wrinkles in them. They have, you could see the nail, you could see the scratches. It's very, very lifelike. And I needed that, that, I don't know, that sense of reality that it's actually someone's hands in these works. And these are all collected weapons and tools from the 18th and 19th century. You can see, I guess, guns and police batons. And I work with a lot of things that we use to build things. I use a lot of things that reflect violence, and I guess like the brutality of life. Here you can see like 3 different feet. So this is when I started realizing, okay, I use shoe molds, I use prosthetics, I used a lot of, as much as I could. And even this, like, you could see that this was a prosthetic much older than the ones I don't think they use this type anymore. But there was a point where I was like, this is not as lifelike as I wanted. But to me, this is a collage again. And then now we're at the collage series, which is called Animals. And I'm just going to show you a few, and we're going to get right into making one. I just want to give a sense, because in the demo, you might not be able to see as close up as I want to show, because the details are really important. Like this has a magic marker, you know, color pencil, oil, ink, pen. And again, the images are vintage, and because everything for me is old and beat up and vintage. That's my, I'm not really good with new things. I like things that have lived and stood the test of time. And here you can even see it's like a newspaper, and I poured so much oil on it that the other side is coming through. And I like that. I like these accidents. The accidents are better than the things that I plan for it. So I just always leave space. Like, I don't even know how this came together. And it just kind of, they come together on their own. If I'm peaceful and quiet enough, the work tells me what it wants me to do. It's not like the more I try to control it, the more awful it comes out. So the more I surrender to it, to me, the better everything works out. And I splatter things, and things spill, and my coffee spills on it, and 100 million things happen. And this was another happy accident. I went to go photocopy these super old photos that I found about protests and activists getting beat up, and police from like the 60s. And by accident, an American flag was left in the photos, and they gave me these big printouts of the American flag. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't want this. And it was color copy, so it was a little expensive. And I was just like, you know what, I'm going to tear these up. And I was going to throw them out. And they found themselves in the work, because it just communicated to me that was exactly what I needed, but I didn't realize it. And it was just this like serendipitous happy accident. And I was putting, like, when you'll see in the other works, actual like these tiny little flags that I had bought online that are fabric. I was pasting those on for the collages, and this was just a photocopy of that flag. But I never would have thought to do that on my own. The accident made it work out really well, because once I put it in paper, I was able to rip it, and became in 2 pieces. And it just feels like the police are fighting against the flag, the activists are falling into it. It just made all the sense in the world. But you know, it was an accident. And I use a lot of stencils, and I layer a lot. This is just watercolor and ink. And it just makes sense to me. That's all it is. It's just about moving things around until they find their place. And these were the flags that I bought online. They're those flags that people use for holidays. They hold them on these little sticks, and people put them on their yards and different places. And I think they're polyester. And so I just bought a bunch of them, and all of a sudden, they just found their way into the work. I was going to just use them. Again, what I had planned and what actually happened were 2 different things. This is just pencil and polyurethane, and that's it. And the polyurethane started, you can see here, like it started eating away at the image. And I was trying to do it really crisp and clean. And you can see here, like, you know, it started getting yellow and bumpy and textured. And I was trying to make it really, I had this whole other plan. And what happened and turned out much more interesting than what I had planned. And I just had to let go and surrender to the process. And it looks really yellow in real life and old. And I love that. And it's exactly what needed to happen. And I needed to let go in order for that to happen. again, with this image, you know, all of these things for me in the end, it's just about surrendering to the image, surrendering to the process. I think these are the last images, and I'm going to get into the actual showing you of how these things come together. This was after 127 collages, which I did like a maniac during the lockdown. This was my sanity, because I couldn't go out on my road trips. I was fostering a dog. I'd adopted another one. I had 3 dogs, and it was everything was shut down, and I was in the house, and I just like, I have to, if I don't start piecing things together, I'm going to start going nuts. And the only thing that I had was old books, old magazines, you know, pen, paper, ink, and images. And I never would have thought that I would come to this place to back on paper, because again, the photography and the painting was not successful for me. It didn't work. So I didn't think I'd be able to work flat, but it just made sense. It just made sense. I realized it's the same thing. It's just about the process of finding things that exist and piecing them together in a way that makes sense to me. And it took me 127 pieces to get to this piece. And I don't know why, but once this happened, this piece, I realized everything else was, I don't like the word failure, but everything else was kind of like an experimentation, because this to me is almost like a painting. And that's what I wanted, but I didn't realize when I started, that's where I wanted to get to. And there's a lot of things where it's the cutouts that I was going to throw out that I would keep, again, accidents, or things that had writing on them that I wouldn't have thought, oh, this is messed up, this has marker on it, this has pen on it, or this is just a cutout of something. When I put that, onto the collage, I started a whole other thing started happening, and I started seeing those shapes and that empty space and the American flag coming through, and the pen marks and the happy accidents, and it just became this whole new thing. And again, these things don't happen unless I let them happen. And I never would have thought about pouring oil. This is a very oily piece and a lot of black, and I have to just really, really let go of my, expectations, and just let the work happen. And this was the first, and I think this is the last image. This was the first American flag that I used, and this is where I think the collages began. And I was just walking my dogs, and I saw a dirty, small American flag that had fallen from someone's car, from someone's yard. And I picked it up, and it's sad. I don't know why I took it home. The objects choose me, I choose them. I don't know. And it sat there on my desk for a while until this happened. And I don't even know how this happened, but once this happened, then I started looking for more, because I knew that this was the beginning of something. And I have just a few more installation shots just to show the work, because it's one thing to see it close up, but to see it, with people and in the world is a whole different thing. And I think for me, that's the whole point, to bring some kind of happiness to people's lives. That's what art does for me. Any kind of art, whether it's music or film or sculpture or painting or it doesn't even matter. It just I can't imagine, like, through the shutdown that we went through, the pandemic, like if we didn't have art in our homes. And it doesn't matter if it was music or video games or whatever, it's all art. It sustains us. It's we need that poetry. Life would be way too tough without it. This is a piece called "You Are Safe Here With Me," and this woman took a photo of her baby in front of it. People interpreted this in a lot of different ways, but she interpreted it as actual safety and happiness and love. And who knows? I mean, I came here as an immigrant that was escaping from my country, and America was our safe place. So but it's not for a lot of people. It has a lot of different. There's a lot of different interpretations, as we all know, and this is a piece called "Carry Me Home," and it's just 2 feet with 2 hands holding it. It's almost like an abandoned person on the floor. I love that the sculptures feel like a whole person, even though it's usually just a few pieces. That's my goal, to show the presence of a human being, but with as little as possible. And this is just the 206 Bones series with the flags, and this is another flag, just to show the scale. These flags they range they range in size. This was a vintage flag that I found, and it just, this was the only, I never did a size like this again. And the other one as well, there was a huge one, but I never did them that big. They're usually a standard size, but I just take the objects as they come. And to me now, after all these years of working, the work is just starting to make sense to me. It took me so many years to be able to see how it all is the same thing. It's just pages from a book. And here's the collages. And at first I didn't realize how much they reflect the rest of the work. And it was only after time passed that I could see that, you know, it's, again, I mean, it seems so obvious. It's flags, it's violence, it's war, but it didn't make sense to me until I did them, they were done, and then I would see them in images. It's always in images that I understand the work. And this is one of my sculptures. It's bronze, the space between us, and shown with the a few of the collages. And I think this is the last piece. And these are some stand-up, very large sculptures of just from 206 bones that are just vintage tools and weapons. I never did pieces like that again, like stand up. They're very heavy and now very expensive to make, and it's a lot of energy, and they're kind of like dangerous when you walk by them. It's a lot of sharp things sticking out. So I'm gonna stop the image, the screen sharing, and take you guys to my studio. Okay. Oliver, can you see the studio? You can see the studio?
Yep.
Okay, great. So let me see if I can see it. Okay, so I'm gonna move this. So I want to just show you guys how, like, for example, this is where, you know, the flag started for me. Like, it was this tiny little polyester kind of like flag. And then the other day I found this. And I don't know why do I come across so many American flags? I don't know, but this one is just huge. And it's so, and this is my favorite. This is what I love. It's stained, it's dirty. And, you know, it still hasn't made sense to me because what I'm used to is this size. So this still doesn't make sense to me, but it's going to sit here for a while until it does. And maybe I'm starting to think now, maybe the paper is too small, but this is how this process works. It's just a matter of collecting. And this is what I do. Let me just show you. I collect. So tons and tons of, you know, American flags. Sometimes I even do like things that I had, like a collage that didn't work. And, you know, half of it is stuck on and half of it is not. But I like this when I rip the photos off, the paint and the background stays, and it's kind of like awkward. I think this is extra too. And it's kind of like, you know, awkward and strange, but it's, you know, it doesn't always have to be this, like a white background. Sometimes these accidents are even more interesting to work on. And sometimes I'll even do something like this where this is ugly on its own, but, or, you know, I'll have like little pieces where I cut out, but I like some kind of messy, dirty background to start off with. And I'll just piece it on top of that. And what is this? This is just basically house paint, you know, acrylic, ink. I use, you know, linseed oil. I'll use, you know, polyurethane. This is just to show you some of the materials, just like this is just watercolor. This is just watercolor. I use very basic stuff. I don't have like super expensive like art supplies. This is a roller that I use. I'm going to show you because the roller, by the way, look how disgusting. This is from 127 collages. It used to be totally clean and flat, and I would use it to just, you know, flatten out the images because you get a lot of air bubbles and things like that. But let me just do one collage just to give you a sense. So if I started out, like, for example, with the American flag, and I'll do a lot of like repetition with the images because I love repetition. But the problem is with the objects, you can't really find, it's very rare that you find, unless you're doing things like zippers or buttons, or like to find a lot of one object, especially like a specific object, it's tough. So this was a photocopy of, I started getting a lot of like old photos online during the lockdown, and that's when really like everything started making sense to me, because the old images of the protests were such a fantastic reflection of what was happening now. And I felt like I had to go back to understand what was happening now. And it just, I didn't want to do, I went out and took photos. I tried to print those and use it, but the older images, again, I like things from the past, I guess. And this is how this works. Like, I can't ever plan it. And sometimes it goes off the page and sometimes it doesn't, but and sometimes it's straight and sometimes it needs to be, not straight, but I just kind of like go back to my pile and I just find stuff. And sometimes it's just like a ripped piece of paper that, it was meant to go in the trash. But when I put it somewhere, it makes sense and it completes it. And that's all it is. It's just a matter of finding a place where it completes on its own without me having to work too hard. Because I just know when I work too hard, it's time to step away. It's all about not working too hard and letting things happen on their own. I already see that this is not good. And I just go back and forth and find images and sometimes even like things where this was a collage that existed and the collage fell apart, but this to me was so interesting. And because of the layers that I put, it's so like, it's just thick. It's like, this is not a good, I'm going to show you the backs of some of these. They're so thick and heavy. And because the amount of oil and polyurethane stuff that I pour on, it just really makes them almost like really thick cardboard. And it's just a matter of finding a place where there's a balance. That's the word I'm looking for, a balance. And again, sometimes these are the best things ever, but I didn't realize that until I threw a bunch out. And I'll put that there. And then what I'll do is, I'll take whether it's pastels, and I'll just like, and fill that space in. I'm going to show you an example. Or I will like make it, this is too light for me. What I would do is pour watercolor. That's what I would do to make it really, really dark. I'm going to show you guys an example of ones that I did like that, where, by the way, I'm going to show you the failures as well, because we always show everything, how like it worked out. Like this was a huge failure. Like when I poured the oil, whatever I did, the face, whatever was happening here, it just was too much. And it just started ripping off and disappearing. And the color became too much. But I had to do this. And I had to do this, which is also another failure. And it was just too much color. And I tried to make it, this is a good piece to remind me when it's just time to walk away. Because I overdid it. And why did I overdo it? Because I kept trying to fix it and I couldn't surrender and realize that it's not working. Another piece that these are all just pieces that failed. Why? To get to this. This was what wanted to happen. This is what needed to happen, right? It's this kind of like and it became out very painterly. But all those pieces, right, had to happen. And there's another one behind it, which was also something that had, like that piece for me, this failed piece had to happen for me to get to this piece, because this piece works so much better. I needed to have two colors, yellow and black. And the reason it's a bit yellow and it's looks a bit, I want to show you some close-up details. Cream, it's the oil, it's the linseed oil. The rest of it is just watercolor. That's all that is. It's just pencil and watercolor. I really, really, even when I painted, it was house paints. I try to keep things really, really simple and just focus on the image that wants to come through. The materials for me, I understand if I was doing oil painting, but I'm not. For these kind of things, I feel like actually the cheaper materials make more sense and it always comes out. This is just basically, I think this one I used a little bit of, I think it's oil paint, but it's just white oil paint. And it was frustrating. I wouldn't do it again because it took a long time to dry and I like immediacy. And this is like the same 3 images, right? Over and over again. And I just layer them on top of each other. And I wanted it to look like a kind of, like they're dancing, like the activists and the police are dancing, like they're almost in flow together somehow. And this is that image you saw. Which one was the one? Oh, And this sometimes happens when I pour the oil. You see that white? I pour the oil, and then I put color. I try to put something on top of it, and I wipe it. I always have tons and tons of things that I can, like a dirty cloth, or I can wipe it, because that kind of moves everything around. And then when that happens, it becomes very, very dirty and messy looking. And that's exactly where, I want to get to. I want them to be beat up, and really super, super messy. For example, this, I feel like it's also a failure. It didn't, I was trying to get that movement, that flow, that dance going, and it doesn't always happen. I feel like there's too much. It's just too much stuff going on. And you have to, at that point, surrender. But getting back to the collage, I just wanted to show you a few of those. And I tried to go to other, and this is my table. Let me just show you. I put the things that I'm going to work with, and I try to keep it to like really a minimal, like, because I don't like a lot of things. It's mostly, for me, it's just about the images, which I always have piles of images cut out, and then the paper's here and the materials are here, and it's just a matter of finding that balance. And I'll use for gluing it down, I'll even use like, what's this? This is mini wax. I'll use mini wax. I'll use gel medium. And let me show you what I do with the, like, let's say, sometimes it's also just very, very simple. Like, I had poured oil on this by accident, but I like that, what had happened, like right there. That's like perfect, because that color, I didn't know that I wanted the black and white to be yellow until I saw it. And that's how it usually happens. It's always like after you see it. And so let's say I glued this down. What I would do is then go like that. And that would just flatten the whole image. And because of this texture, actually, this is another happy accident. In the beginning, we just make it flat. Now, when I use it, it leaves bumps and spots that are missing, and extra kind of texture. And it really, I like that. It really, that's a great thing. But I didn't realize it until I destroyed it and saw what happens when you destroy a roller. I never would have known that.
Sarah, I got a quick question for you.
Sure.
What kind of substrate are you using most often?
What kind of what?
Like a substrate.
Why am I not hearing you? A substrate?
Oh, substrate. Yeah, that was from the chat.
What's a substrate? Is that I feel stupid, but I don't know what that is. Substrate?
A substrate, let's see.
I'm trying to figure out. This is working right now for me, this collage. But I don't know, what is substrate? I use the only materials that I use gel medium. It's like a very, very simple matte finish. The ones they use it for paintings. They use it for various things. I think mostly paintings and collage, but I think they might even use it for coating the canvas. But like, and this to me, it's becoming almost, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so you're going directly onto canvas or cardstock or cardboard, and then gel or matte medium to adhere everything to it, correct?
This is actually what I'm doing now, and I just wanted to show you this. When we use, I'm going to answer that right now, because I'm going to show you the book that I have, the paper. Like, this is already, I like what's happening here. And what I like is when it's like a peekaboo kind of thing, and you can use either side. You just kind of play around with it until you get that color, that feel where it feels right. But I like when the cutout parts, the garbage parts of the collage come back and kind of add another layer. So I'm going to show you. Yeah, I like what's happening there. Yeah, this is already coming out really amazing. I use this. It's just the weight is really important. It's I'm just looking for the weight. I think it's a 140. What's the, oh, it's 100 actually. I like to use heavier, but this is actually 100. So it's just paper, but the heavier the better. If you're going to get, like, let me show you the backs of some of these. If you're going to get really, really oily and thick, like the ones like mine are, like this one got really, like the back, do you see that? Like, that's so much stuff that I poured on. I'm lucky this paper was okay. So I would go, if you're going to do heavy stuff and you want to experiment, like, look, I used oil, I used, watercolor, and I didn't want first of all, just technically, you don't want the paper to buckle. So the heavier the weight, I think the later ones I used, the weight was 300. But the beginning, I didn't know much. I was kind of just experimenting. You start with a new medium. You still don't know how it's going to react. So you just do a bunch. Again, another failure. But in this failure, I realized what those empty spaces do and what I can do with those empty spaces. But I'm just trying to see what else I could show you. Like this one worked for me. That one I liked. And I did more with more empty spaces. But again, it's experimentation when you start a new medium. But I just use paper. I just use heavy paper because I know myself, and I'm not going to work light. I know there's going to be the oil and even the paints, like the paper is going to buckle, the photos or whatever you're working with. I had textiles and photos, so it's going to be, I need a strong background for it. So the heavier, the thicker the paper. And if there was a point where I'm trying to see if I have it here. I do. I even use, like, look how the backs are like crazy. I even use this very, very thick one for this one that got really, 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 really heavy. The background is cardboard, but it was like a found cardboard. Oh, you can't see with this one. I think the one that's here, this one you can see because it's black. You can see it's cardboard. Because I knew that the heavier, the stronger it is, the less that, everything's going to buckle and make. I hate the bubbles. Bubbles happen, and that's why I got this, because I was researching and trying to find things that I can use to flatten the images. I wanted them to be really, really flat. And at the same time, even if the bumps happen, I'm just going to work on something while I'm talking. Even if the bumps happen, I still think that it's fine, because what I was doing is I would take like my scissors, or if you have an X-Acto knife or something, and I would just cut right on the collage where the bubble is, and then I would flatten it out. Because bubbles happen with collage. It's not something, but for me that was all right, because I like the cuts, I like the bruises, I like the mistakes, I like the messes. But if you don't like that, then you have to make sure that everything's just very, very flat before it's before you put more and more layers of the gel, of the polyurethane, of whatever you're using, because once it's stuck on, then there's not much you can do about it. But in the beginning, you can still, figure out a way to flatten it. Those bubbles are very frustrating. It just all depends on the glue and the heaviness and the paper. And sometimes it's even when you have everything right, you still get a bubble. So the flatter for me, like, for example, like this was something that I did. I didn't wind up using it, but it was from an anatomy book, and it's very, very thick. And I cut it out. I thought it was going to be this big, huge collage, but the collage was destroyed. But I like this so much. Let me put it on its own so you can see it. That I cut it out because I love the legs and the baby, and just everything was so beautiful. I didn't want to lose these images, so I cut it out. And I'm always trying to find a place for it in the collage. But it doesn't always work. The subjects have to kind of like make sense together. And I moved around a lot. Like this to me it so clearly does not work, because it's not just that they have to match like the war and activism like subjects or whatever, but it just has to make sense. It has to find its place. The images somehow find their place, and that the anatomy didn't work. Like I'm going to show you in the midst of this. I started doing just very cheap, like these were like good quality photocopies, but this was like a very cheap photocopy that I did. It was just like,
Hey, Sarah. Something just happened to your audio.
Oh.
Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
There you go. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. I don't know what, it was definitely off mute. I don't know what happened. I'm trying to think if I touched it. Okay. Did you hear me about this?
right about there is where I lost you.
Okay. Now, I was just saying that I poured something by accident on this, and it was a cheap photocopy that I did, but by pouring something accidentally and the way that it poured, and it worked out. So we have to just surrender to the process, I guess, and let it happen. Should I keep going, or are there any questions or anything that you want me to?
Yeah, so specifically in terms of the mediums that you use for gluing stuff down, are you just using a standard gel medium? Is that what you're using mostly?
Yeah, exactly. That's all I use. I use the gel medium to glue it down. Once I glue it down, I use some kind of roller, something to flatten it, right? And then my next go-to is, it's not a lot of material. It's basically clear semi-gloss, or yeah, these are the same, polyurethane. That's all it is, fast drying. To me, I use mostly watercolor and polyurethane because and the fast drying one, because I need it to be really quick. And the gel medium is something that dries really quick, and all the other stuff. The only thing I have a problem with is the oil. Usually what I'll do is, like, let's say I have, like, this is the composition. Let's add one more thing. Like, let's just say this is the composition, and, you know, I've glued this down. The next thing I'll do is, let's put one more thing.
You're, of course, gluing with gel medium first and then using your oil products on top of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What I do is, everything's glued down with the gel medium, and then I'll pour the oil on top of it, right? Very, very like basic, very easy. I don't think I can open this up while I'm talking, but I just pour and it's usually linseed oil. That's the one, because it has this yellow tone. And that's what you see right here. That's where you see like that yellow tone that's come, rather than what the photo was, which was black and white. So what I do is pour it on, right? And it stains the paper, it stains the photos, it stains the flag, and I let it sit. And I move it to the side, and I start a new piece of paper. And that dries, and then I go to the polyurethane. Either I pour more linseed oil, depending on the color, because the color, I'll know that sometimes you need 3 layers of oil. Or then I'll go, once it's dry, I'll add the black. And that's when, like, these kind of things happen, where it takes the color or it doesn't. The oil and the paint kind of like fighting against each other, and like parts of it will stay white and parts of it will go yellow, and things will start, you know, fading out. But that's what I love. That's what I love, the oil and the watercolor fighting. And then once I feel like, okay, it's done, I'm happy with the color, I'm happy with the staining, I'm happy with, it's very rare that I use color. Like, it's very rare. Like, all these, I like the simplicity of, like, the American flag popping out with the color. I don't really like the ones that came out dark with just the yellow. I'm most pleased with those, I think. Sometimes I'll do, like, you know, a little bit, but it's very, very like rare. I prefer like a softer kind of tone. Then I'll seal it. I'll just seal it with the polyurethane, but it's always the watercolor, the oil, and make the gel medium. Once that's dry and done, then I seal it with the polyurethane. And I try to just do one coat, because it's very intense. These are like very strong chemicals, and I'm not a fan of using this stuff, but it really gives it a hard finish that I want. They're not, these collages are not like soft. They're very, they're rough, they're thick, and I like that. I like them to be really gritty, like the sculptures. So once I put the polyurethane, then that's why then it has that feel. It has it where it feels like it's been laminated, but it's better. Laminating is too clean and perfect. And I want to show you something that I did that was a complete failure, but I went to a larger size, and this didn't work out. And I went to old, kind of like, I think it was, and again, this is like backgrounds that I was playing around with, and I was going to work on top of it. Didn't work out. Complete failure. And I started going to larger papers, and I went to old Playboy magazines and like older magazines, and I got like you see how here it's buckling? And I tried so hard to flatten it out, but then I was playing around with that empty space and I thought that was working. But, you know, I'm going to put this on the table. You just never know what's going to happen. And you have to just trust the process that it's going to get you somewhere, you know? And I like that I really like, you know, sometimes it's just like, you like certain things that happen, but you don't like everything that happens, you know? And I like the pencil marks. It was like kind of like, felt like her body was cut up into pieces. Let me go on this thing. Let's see if I can get up. It's really big paper, so it was tough to get it all in. But you can see like it just, it's very different from what I was doing. It became more like a painting, and I'm not a big fan of like the whole, like the porn thing, but I was trying to take it somewhere else. And sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And you just have to trust the process and know that it's going to get you to a better place maybe. And you need to let it take you there. But I think I like more brutal things. And I even tried, this was a complete failure. I even tried to do the American flag and the violence along with the porn, and I'm still working on that. Because I've been, you can see I'm like ripping things, and things are not always ripping the way I want them to. And then I'm putting things on top of it again and trying to fix it. And sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. But like, for example, this is the sculpture that's been sitting here for, I think, 2 years. And it felt like a really good idea. And it hangs and it's prosthetics and collected objects. But, you know, I don't know where to go from here. And I just need to let it hang there and look at me. It feels like a person. And I like that. But I don't know what else to do with it. And it's a happy place for me between textiles and metal and wood. But, you know, I wanted to get to this place. This I just recently finished, and it feels finished. And I like the way how this is for me, this is the foundation again of the collage. I mean, you can just see like, it's just guns that I collected, police batons. And I put these together and it just sat here. And then I realized I need a hand. That's what's going to complete the piece. That's what I need. And I need a wheel, but that took a while to come together. And you just have to keep going. The only thing I could do for the first year was just piece these together. I'm going to move back so I can, sorry, I'm just walking around in my studio. Like for me, you know, once I did that piece, this flag made sense. The flag wasn't making sense. I thought I made a mistake with it. I was going to, what should I do with it? Should I, you know, destroy it? Should I? But once this piece happened, then I started to be able to see this piece. And sometimes that happens. One piece leads you to the next. And for me, this, again, I'm just going to try to move back so you could see it. This is the foundation of the collage. And this is collaging. This is absolutely, you know, collaging. All I'm doing is piecing things together next to each other in a way that feels, you know, organized for me somehow. It feels like it makes sense. And, you know, that's, for me, that's all, you know, collaging or art or anything is. It's just, I'm going to try to move back so you could see. It's just about, yeah, now I have a little bit of distance, you can see. Like that's a collage. That is a collage. It's just with textiles. And, you know, I think now that I look back, it really is this compulsion of finding things and putting them next to each other in a way that brings me some kind of sanity, brings me some kind of peace. Like this sculpture, again, I had 4 arms. I'm in the Foundry. I'm like, why did I do this? This is not making sense. 2 of the arms were like that by themselves. And then I had these 2 arms. I pieced them together separately. And I had this image of how they were going to come together. But once I saw them, I was like, this is a disaster. I can't cut this up. I can't destroy it. I can't rip it up. And it took me so long to get it to a place where, like the collages, I made them fit. And it was a lot of like moving and back and forth. And then all of a sudden it became like roots. All of a sudden it became like, and the piece is called Stay Close to Me. And when it's hard to see it like this, but when it's on the wall, you can see how they're almost like these roots, like cut off roots, but they're so tightly wound up and close together. I don't want to move this iPad too much because the screen's going to change. And this is that piece I was talking about. This is what it was. It was basically this sculpture. This is what I did. I took, and I thought, oh, this is a great idea. This is going to be amazing because this found object was so amazing to me. And it's a drill bit. And so I made this sculpture, and this was my intention for it, like this. And it was like, oh, this makes sense. This is interesting. I love it. But then I was like, this is not finished. Just like how, you know, with everything else, like I knew this is not finished. It's incomplete. It's not enough. And I don't know what to do with it. Again, I can't, it's too expensive to do anything with it. I'm just going to let it sit there. And then, you know, I did this piece, which I felt like was such a great idea. And it felt like, you know, crap. It was just like, what is this? Like, this just feels like so incomplete. Like shouldn't be in the air. This, you know, I made one. The only part I liked that was one was longer than the other. And I like the tight, the holding, and, you know, that I liked. The color came out good, but it was incomplete. It was only until I took this other piece and put it on top of this piece and started moving it around until it made sense. It, like, just like the collages, it's always the same thing for me. It's always the same thing. And then once that came together, and it was two arms, instead of just, I'm sorry, two hands, two sets of hands rather than one set. The doubling is what completed the piece. And I never would have known that. I never would have known that, because my idea, what took me to the Foundry was not this image. But it took me there and had me make both sculptures, and then I pieced it together later on. And this needs to connect. Lines are very important to me. I'm going to do a collected object version of the collage, just to show you that it's the same exact thing. Like, these are just the objects that I found, just like the images, and just pieced it together up to here, and it was still incomplete. And then I realized I need two cast hands. And then the wheels came. And in the end, it made sense. But it was just a process that I had to trust. And again, I almost, a lot of these pieces I want to give up on. But I can't. This is a piece that I'm working on that's still not complete. And it's been sitting here. And the reason I want to go to this piece, because nothing is stuck together. Everything is just placed, just like the collages. And I'm trying to make it into this person. And it all started with these legs. And it was these legs that I saw that started this entire piece. And a lot of times it's just one object that kind of like starts, like, this is so, it's just so interesting. And it came with these 4 feet, 1, 2, 3, but the other foot's here. It's not really attached, but these legs are so interesting. It started the whole piece. And what I do is I've already pieced some of it together, but again, it's not attached. So I'm still working on it and playing around. And I just want to show you the process, how this works. Like, I'll have like random, just like the collages, like where I have like a bunch of images here, I'll have like objects that I found, right? Like I don't even know what this is. This is a police baton. I don't love them. They upset me, but I use them a lot. I use wheels a lot, shovels, and there's a gun, and then random things, you know, like I don't know what this is, but that's part of the interesting part of it. And just like tools and things that, you know, things that have been things added to and discarded. And I like things that are really, really like just almost destroyed, but not really. And then I'll have a table here where I'll have like more objects and things that I could add. There's always objects around. And then I'll start, you know, I'm going to go back. I'll just start, you know, moving things in a way where I like it to all be lined up and feeling like there's some kind of like balance. I think that's what I'm looking for. It's always about, I'm gonna move back. And I like these little details, and that's why I try to get small, big, you know, I always keep in mind that the composition comes together with the most randomest objects. And right now it really looks like crap, but it always, like I could see there's an empty space here. And sometimes it fits perfectly and sometimes it doesn't. But it's always, and sometimes you look at it and it fits, but it looks like crap. But it's always this process of trying to find objects that you like, that are interesting, not knowing what's going to happen. Like this, I'm not sure if that's working. And, you know, like this background, and taking a risk on them anyway. You buy all this stuff and you know, you're almost borderline hoarder. But like, if I hadn't bought this and I had no idea what this was going to be, these feet wouldn't have, like that background, like they wouldn't have fit in here so well. I had to kind of just, it's a lot of, you're gambling. Like this, I was so small, I didn't know what was going to happen, but it fit perfectly here. And a lot of times, you know, I don't know what's going to happen. Like I have to keep playing with what the object is meant to do until I can, you know, sorry about that, until I can find a place for it. But that's all it is. And when you go down to the foundation, like this was a lot of layering. This is just a lot of stuff like that's been put together in order to make something else. So Oliver, before I continue, I just wanted to get a sense of time and to see if there's any questions. Here's a image of the clutter of my studio.
I don't have any questions for you right now. One question I had for you personally is, earlier you were talking about using polyurethane to finish your collages.
Yes.
Are you only using photocopies, or are you directly cutting out of magazines?
No, I don't use, let me go back to, I don't use, honestly, I use everything. Are you,
do you have problems with the other side showing through after you add the polyurethane?
You mean like when I put the polyurethane, like the back of it?
Like when you put polyurethane on a page of a magazine, it'll show the other side oftentimes.
Oh, I just got what you're saying. Yes. So what I was saying to you is, I think that I showed one. Where is that image? It happened, but it was it was a happy accident. That's exactly, so I'm very aware, like if I'm using something thin, I know exactly what you're saying. If I'm using something thin, the polyurethane is going to make the other side bleed through. Absolutely. But, you know, like for this or something that, you know, it's a photocopy, or it's just a thick magazine page, or it's a page from a book. I can't find the one that it bled through, but here's some more examples of those, the cutouts becoming the collage. And maybe I can show you that the roller did this. And the roller used to just flatten the image out, but then it started taking from the image because the oil and the paint was still wet. But then I like that happened. That's another, like sometimes, like, you know, I would never have planned for things, but it happens and it really works out. But to answer your question, I think it's, was it this one? There's one of these images that the newspaper, you can see the other side, and it was thin. But if it's thick, it really doesn't happen. But if it's thin, sometimes, like this one, you could see the face, the other side was coming through a little bit. But I'm happy with those kind of things. It doesn't bother me. But if someone doesn't want that, yeah, it's not good. You want to be careful pouring the oil too heavy or the polyurethane too heavy. And like, let me just go through the brushes, and like the brushes also, like, you know, if you're using really thick brushes, yeah, it's gonna force the other side through, or it's gonna start, you know, cutting away, you know, at the image. So you can use more. I don't use very soft brushes. I use like, you know, paint brushes that, you know, you paint a house with, or like that I would pour, what is it? Because I also, the reason I use the mini wax is because I use it for these a lot. I use it for my sculptures, because when I get these, a lot of times the sculptures are the wood is very dry, and I want the colors to kind of like be matching. So I use it for the wood sculptures a lot. And then I realized I like the way it looks. I like the way it hardens and protects against water, against everything. So I started thinking, okay, let me just experiment. And I like the way it worked out. And I just kept using it, but you shouldn't use too much, because too much, and make sure, I mean, unless you want it, but I don't use high gloss. I use matte, And I'm trying to find the one that I was going to show you, but I can't seem to find it where it did come through, but it worked out. You just have to be like really, I'm open to things going wrong, and I'm open to experimenting. Like I want to show this other one that, this is another one that I really, and it's the same, literally the same image. These are photocopies of a photo. They're just photocopies of a photo, and the rest of it is basically just white house paint and pencil. And this color that you see is basically just linseed oil. And once the oil stained the photos and made it like a yellowy kind of whatever color, and the paper as well, because the paper was white, then I would pour just one very thin layer of polyurethane, and I would just kind of like messy too, not even like very clean or heavy, because I like the roughness. I like to see the stroke. You can't really see it, but and this is what I like, that I can get wet and the polyurethane protects it. Anything can happen, and it's like it makes the paper even like thicker. But I like the lines that it creates. I like that this paper starts to look like wood, or it starts to look like bronze, because of the texture of the brush. Because like sometimes I'll get, you know, paint from something else on it, and I like these accidents. I like it to be beat up. So for me that works, but for someone that wants a very straight, clean, perfect line, that's not going to work out so well. I like here, you know, it was the oil, the polyurethane was really just eating away at the photo. But then I dried it out, and whatever went away because of that process was perfect. I needed what remained, and I wouldn't have taken that away unless it was taken away by the material that I was using. But I use very, very simple, like literally mini wax, matte gel medium, watercolor, pencil, pen, and the rest is the main thing is the images, the subject matter. That's more important to me than anything else. And here you can see the happy accidents of the oil and the paint and the polyurethane. Like this just happened on its own. Like I didn't plan for it. I always want these things to happen. And I try to rub, and I try to erase, and I try to take away, and with the brushes and with all the stuff that I use. But this stuff just always surprises me. And most of the time it's perfect. And then sometimes I want to show this one, because this was a paper that I was about to throw out. And I don't like doing white backgrounds. I mean, from the flags to the sculpture, I like stuff there. I guess that's where I like the objects that someone used and discarded, or someone used and didn't want anymore. I like stuff there. So this was something that, you know, I was doing something on, I was about to throw out. And once I started placing the images, and they're very random images that I would never have thought could come together, but they did, and it formed a kind of poetry that I never would have planned for. What happened here is, to me, like I can't, you know, this is what I always want to happen, where it doesn't make sense, but it's poetic. And I would have never thought about painting or coloring or writing numbers or doing these kind of like things. It was just what was on the paper before I started. And this happened, and this is it. This is fantastic. This is what I want. But the problem is for me, not for everybody else, this is the one I showed you before, I can't always plan for these things. These are things that happen in the process of the making. I don't even know what this was. I don't know if I wrote this before. I don't even know what it says. But this is stuff that happens in the making, and in you, like this. This was just the oil and the paint becoming almost like a tie-dyed, and I didn't even intend it for it to be pink. It just, things mixed, the chemicals and the oils, and that happened. And I was, you know, I got scared. I was like, oh my God, it's ruining it. Why is there pink on this? But it works. There's a little tiny bit of pink here, and a little bit there, and a little bit of there, and there's balance. And I don't know how that happened. But it's, again, like this. I thought, oh my God, I just ruined it. Like I was using this really thick, let me show you. I was using, I also use this where use it for like painting, right? For the thicker paints, and I just kind of like scrub away at it sometimes. So it becomes, it kind of like gets rid of, gets the oil moving, and sometimes the watercolor, and I like it. But sometimes I go too rough, and it, that happened. And I was like, I destroyed it. Oh my God, after all this work. But then I set it aside. I didn't destroy it. And I realized in the whole photo, like in the whole collage, it somehow makes sense. But at the time I was like, I have to destroy this. So you have to kind of trust the process. You have to know to step away. And always, this is another thing I wanted to mention. That's why I'm showing these finished pieces, because collect. If you're going to do collages, if you're going to do sculpture, if you're going to do anything with discarded stuff, collect. These images, these were images that I photocopied from photos that I ordered, but these images were images that I just collected. Like I just had books, and I didn't throw them out, and I just collected and collected. And it just like that first flag that came into my life, it was just because I didn't throw it out, and I let it sit there until it told me, why it's here, why it's in my studio. All these images, this is another one that, again, I would have never thought, but I think a little bit of the fuchsia watercolor spilled, and then I just let it take over the paper. And I never would have done this in fuchsia. I would have just gone to black and white and oil. And I don't know why this turned upside down. I think it fell and it stuck because the gel medium also just takes, if the paper is thin, like this is one of the ones, Oliver, that this was a thin one. This was like a very thin book, but it just fell and I couldn't take it off again. So I started working around it, and it just, what happened here was something I couldn't have even planned for if I wanted to. And the color, I let it take over the whole page. And I think it's a lot of this for me is about surrendering to the process. Cause like what happened here with that line, and then her sleeping here, and then it just like, I would have never put this upside down if it was in my control. So, and it just happened. And then sometimes, I don't even see the faces or the people. I just see the lines and how the composition kind of, and with that, I start doing the pencil lines. Once I glue everything down, put the oil dries, then I start doing the pencil lines. The polyurethane is always the end. And the pencil lines are also just very, very like loose. I just take, just like that. Like I don't even plan for it. It's almost like a poetry. And I just make lines. Like I'm going to show the ones that the activist ones. I'm not a fan of this one. The activist ones, right? These, the pencil lines came to add to the kind of movement that was happening in the photos. I felt like, I'm going to go back so you can see this. This for me felt like an explosion. And it was a lot of protest. There still is a lot of crazy stuff happening in the streets. And this was just like responding to the energy that was outside of my door. And I think it felt like everything all at once. It felt so thick and so heavy, and it felt so condensed. And that's how the collages for me felt: condensed, thick, heavy, like everything's just attacking itself and eating away at itself. And once I started gluing the images down, very quickly on top of each other, layered, then the pencil lines came. And the paint I would add like to soften the pencil lines on top of it. But the pencil lines came to make it almost like more of a movement. And also it just became like a painting once I added the pencil lines and the paint. It almost felt like, you could see, it almost felt like the image on a piece of paper was not enough. I wanted it to be like edgy, like almost like I'm trying to think, like white noise, like this, like buzzing almost. I wanted to have like a feeling of like wasps, like groups of wasps, because that's what it was feeling like outside. And I don't want to, this one again, I'm not happy with what happened here, but I show the failures to show the successes. And this was what I wanted to get to, but that one, the colors just took over. I'm not a fan of color. I always think it works out. This, like what happened here, like that foot, like the paper ripped and I didn't want to throw it out. So I tried it and it just felt like this person that was like falling, and you can't even see what's going on anymore. And I like that when things just, when the images lose themselves. You can see here, this is a person getting beat up by police, right? But they're so, I'm going to show you right now actually how when you layer it and layer it and layer it and layer it, then it starts taking on a life of its own. And that's what I wanted. I wanted it to be like this dance, like this movement. And that's why this for me works, because it's just white and pencil and people laying on top of each other. But like this, all I see is like the blue and the black. It was too much. It was just too, and the police are still there. You still see the activism and all the subjects that I wanted to address and things. But once I did the color and the black and the blue, that took on a life of its own. And it was too strong. It overpowered everything else. So I'm going to show you. I'm going to go back to the collage, Oliver. Is there anything that anyone...
I do have another question for you.
Okay, I felt that.
Yeah, about how you pour your bronze. I don't know if you could speak to that. Does someone else do that for you, or do you?
Oh yeah, I can't. I wish I was so wealthy where I had my own foundry, but I'm not there yet. I actually go to this place called Moderne Art Foundry, and it's an amazing foundry that did Louis Bourgeois' first spider. And they're family owned, and they've been there for like 150 years, maybe I think 100 years, something like 150 years. And basically, they do everything there. These are all like, I go there, I cast body parts. You can see it's all very. I use very lifelike. I use these molds that show the wrinkles, because there's so many different ways. After years of doing this, I've realized there's so many different ways to cast. And I use the molds that really, I want it to be really detailed and lifelike. I want every single little, inch of details of the skin showing. And they are incredible. They work with a lot of amazing artists, and they do everything. I like to go there. I don't give, like, a lot of artists are like, oh, I want 5 of these. And they let them finish it and do everything. But for me, I go there, we cast the body parts together. I go there for the molds that after, once you cast them, I don't have any waxes. They're done in waxes, and then you go and see the waxes. I can show some images maybe. They're like, in the wax, you check to make sure everything is the way you want it to, like the feet, the curve of the feet, all the little lines and details you can see in the wax. So if you don't want it, the good thing about wax is you can just immediately clean it. Like, wax is very soft, and if you just kind of like take something that's a little bit sharp or warm, you can just melt it away and change it in any way you want, because once obviously it gets into this form, there's no going back. So I check it, and then I come back for the finishing, because the finishing is everything to me. And things that happen like this, and like, let me show you another example of, like, it just, the finishing is everything to me. I have to be there because I like to, scratch it and beat it up, make sure the elbows are showing, make sure that the toes are just right, the fingers, and that happens in the ammonia that you pour, in the, the grinding that you do, and all that is, you can have it in your control, or you can have them, shine it up and make it really like some of the sculptures that we see in contemporary art, where they're very clean, and sometimes they're even painted green, yellow, whatever. I like to keep it. I use white bronze and I pour ammonia. That's my process. I went through a lot of different things and realized I don't like the red tones. I don't like colors. It's a process. You find yourself in making these things, and you figure out what you need and what you want. And in the beginning, they were finishing it up really clean, and because that's what they thought I wanted, because everybody wanted that, getting rid of all the mistakes. And then after time, like years of working together, I think I worked there for over a decade, we realized that it's, for me, it's the mistakes. In fact, it's the parts that cracked, the parts that didn't come through the way we thought they were going to come through, that I want to keep, and I don't want to clean it up. So I go there for every single little thing, because, for example, they would have straightened this out. They would have cleaned that up. This looks like, broken ankle that you piece together. But that to me is everything. You know, I want that Frankenstein look. I want life. I want it to be a reflection of someone that's lived and survived. And you can see here, like this, they would have gotten, that's like an extra piece, but those are the things that I live for. So I don't know if that answers the question, and then some, right?
And Speedos, another question while you're while you're on these assemblages is so with these found pieces with the prosthetics, how are you building these so they stay together?
Oh, okay, great questions. Let me take you to my other area. So I use everything. There's a lot I have to say, because objects don't necessarily stay on textiles, like the objects that I use, the heavy. I'm trying to see if this flag has, I do a lot of experimenting. Like it's a lot of experimentation work. Like I'm trying to think, like with this was a heavier, oh, sorry about that. This was a heavier thing and it wouldn't stay on. So I had to find something else. And I inserted this into this textile and sewed the textile on, because there's no way of sewing on a knife. You know what I mean? So there's things where I literally have to troubleshoot. So there's no past, like, you know, stuff that you can look at. Like with these are like heavy duty screws for wood and for metal that I get from, you know, online, Home Depot. I'm always looking. And that's how I do it. Like, for example, if I want to attach, here's something that took me 20 years to do. If I wanted to learn, maybe I can help someone else that has this in mind. Like, for example, I want to attach this arm, right, or this hand to this piece. It's a wooden piece. There's no way of attaching a bronze object to a wooden piece. When you take it to the foundry, it's gonna burn the wood. They have to weld it, and they have to. And so I started learning when I started looking for my objects, and piece after piece that got ruined or didn't work out. I can find a wooden piece, but it's always got to have a metal piece attached to it. Then I can screw the wood onto the sculpture, because that's all I do. I'll show you the drills and things that I use. But this random piece, I don't even know what this was, this piece. But this piece is what made this piece possible, because this has this bronze. We weld the hand to this, right? And what the only other part that he did was, I think on one of these fingers, he made a hole and he screwed this piece to this piece. So he made a hole here, and he put a bolt or a screw into the gun, and then he welded that back and cleaned it up. So it's a lot of like troubleshooting and figuring things out. I'm going to show you another one. And I use this one, we already saw this collage. I'm always looking, I'm always collecting tools, like, because I never know at what I need. And sometimes the most random things that I use, that here's some of my cloths that I use like the cloths and things that I use for there you go. That's a good sense for the collages. Like it's hard as hell. It's filled with oil and filled with color. And when I put this on the collage, a bunch of different color and things come on it from other things. And that's what I like. I like layers and texture and messes and accidents. And that's, and even like stuff like this, I can sometimes like brush when it's in the oil process, or I wouldn't do it in the polyurethane process because it would just ruin this, but in the paint process, and it gives it texture. I might use, this. And these are things that just, I collect and I just always have, because I never know what I need until I'm in the process of the making. And these are just like tools that I have. Like this is something I didn't even know what this was. For the flags, when the objects got so heavy, I couldn't sew them anymore. This kind of helped me with putting something, let me show you, like something like this. I didn't even know what that was. I had to Google and search, what do people use for jeans? What do people use for belts? Like that, something like that. Like, how do you do that? Because I couldn't sew it. It was just, it broke your hand trying to sew. You like hands were bleeding. The needles were breaking. So this is stuff that I learned only through the making. And I have tons and tons of drill bits because they all break. Because like the stuff that I'm using, the objects, this is just like 3 piles. I don't know, I just pile them on. The objects that I'm using, the wood, they are from the 18th century, 19th century. They are so thick and hardcore, because they used to actually make things that last back then. Not like now, you go to Home Depot, everything's plastic. This is like, this stuff was, try drilling through this. I'm going to show you the drills, but it's really heavy duty. Like smoke comes out. Another thing that happens, I learned in the process of making, is that you buy these sometimes expensive because they're really old, and it's very rare. Like if you find a mold like this, or a baton like this, like you might not find another one. It's going to take a while. These are like road trips, and I'm not a fan of buying things online, eBay. You need to see it. I need to see what that texture is. I need to see what that color tone is. I can't online. I never get what I think I'm going to get. So once you have these things and you have the piece in mind, and then you come to drilling it and it cracks, and none of these cracked, because the ones that cracked, I had to replace, because again, when wood cracks, you can't, it's a dangerous thing. I wouldn't keep working with it. But once that happens, you're kind of like lost that object. Now you're going to go drive 6 hours back to Massachusetts and find another one. So I had to buy a lot of things that I never thought that I would need. That I have like several drills. These are very strong, and these are the kind of drills that crack things. So I try to go really soft, really light, but a lot of different bits. I use, let me show you the screws that I use to attach things. I have tons and tons of different sizes, because some of them require super, super long. This isn't even super long. I end up black because they're meant for wood and they're meant for metal. I use these in the Foundry as well. I try to keep a lot of different options. It's very rare that I use these. These are like, but sometimes depending on, you just want to have a lot of options, depending on the wood, depending on the metal. I'm going to show you, I think it's here. Yeah, like these, for example, I use, are these the ones? Oh no, I'm sorry. These, for example, I don't know if to everyone, it was not common sense to me. Like my brother would help me with these. My brother is my savior, because there's just no way of me making these on my own. It requires two people and a great deal of upper body strength. And thank God my brother's a bodybuilder. And he also is incredible at piecing things together. And he was like, okay, let's look at that. I'm going to take these two and attach them, right? This needs to be, right, like that. That needs to, these are things that you just don't realize. So I need to get a drill to be able to go that deep. The drill bits I have are all like probably just up to here. And I need a nail that's going to go. Just finding these nails and making sure that they don't break, because I would start drilling and it would break right there. And, again, this is very heavy, thick wood. I didn't think that things were going to start cracking and breaking and steam was going to come out and all these things until I started working with them. And in the Foundry, a lot of bronze was melting things. And I'm going to show you one other thing that took me a very long time to figure out. And again, this was because of my brother. I started realizing that I need to order, because these break all the time. I don't know if there's something that I'm missing. If there's something that someone knows, email me. I had to find very, very long drill bits, because I realized the ones that these are the ones that I found. And again, these are destroyed. And this one, for example, broke. They break in the middle of the piece, and you're left with this much stuck in the piece, and you have to get it out. This is and if you can see right now the difference between these two, right? Like that's how it was, and that's when it broke. But I started with, when I first started these sculptures, I started with these drill bits, and I didn't realize that they were going to break. I didn't realize how thick I was going to go. Like this is what I knew, but this is what I needed to get to. So this is a huge difference. And the drills were burning out. These they work for certain things, but not, again, for like, let me take this drill bit. Not as the pieces get thicker and bigger, like something like that, you need something really, this isn't even enough. So finding tools is like an ongoing life struggle. But these are some of the screws you can see. And sometimes I'll paint over them. and cover them up. With this one, you can't really see that many, but with these, because of the details of, like, for example, if you see the object that is here, this was on its own, this was here. So I like to kind of like match, like these were, you know, all here. So I just kind of like, I want it to look, you know, like it's really been through the grind, like it's messy, it's been through something, it's natural. Also, I piece, like if there's a hole, sometimes I'll fix it, and other times I just let it be. If there's a mistake in the wood like that, that's fantastic, that's fine. I let things be, and I try to bring an authentic version. I'm upside down on this piece, out of the piece, out of the pieces coming together. I don't want to force things, and I don't want to polish things. I could have painted that, but I just let it be. It's a mold, and I think it adds to the piece. Again, more things that have like withered away and kind of like, you know, someone else would clean that up and polish it. But for me, no, I just like to, I'll seal it so it doesn't get more damaged. But I won't, you know, like this I need to fix. That's like, I'll stain the wood, you know, but that's the extent of it. I like to keep it as is. I like these details. I like that half the paint is gone and it really, it's been through something. So Oliver, I'm going to go back. I wanted to show, since they asked that, because it was very, if someone had told me that, it would have really been helpful. I just like the screws to use, and, you know, to be able to, I mean, just look at, like, just to connect all those objects. It's a difficult process. Like, just to get that hand in there was like a very difficult process. But again, we drilled through that. We had to find something that was not going to break the wood underneath it, which is from the 18th century and cracks like with the slightest bit of pressure. And then to clean that weld up and not lose that tone, and to not lose the details of that hand also is another thing. Because once you weld, you lose the fingerprint, you lose the skin tone. So to add skin tone on top of that place that you had to open up to attach the object, you know, that's a whole other thing. But this is just stuff that you learn from doing. That's what I'm always like, don't, if I was going to try to figure out how to make all this stuff, I would have had a heart attack. Maybe I wouldn't even started. You know, like, yeah. I would have just been like, one flag's enough. But like, this is just in the doing is where the learning comes, and in the mistakes is where the magic happens. So,
okay. One last question for you.
Sure. I'm trying to get back to my.
Okay. How do you pronounce your last name?
Oh, Rahbar.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, some people that pronounce the H. Okay. I'm just trying to get back to my collage. They say Rahbar, but you don't really like, it's either or is fine. I've been living in America for my whole life, I think 40 years, and everyone just calls me Rahbar. So I just stuck. It doesn't really matter to me. Should I flip it? I don't know what time it is. It's 3:05.
Oh, right. Well, it's 3 o'clock. So that pretty much concludes our program. If anyone else has any questions, you guys can go ahead and ask them. Well, Sarah is still here.
I hope I didn't shake too much. That was my wrist is killing me.
No, it's great. All right, everyone. Well, thanks everyone for coming out. And I really appreciate it. And if you look in the chat, everyone is saying goodbye to you because they enjoyed it so much. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I was gonna say, I'm so happy because I was going for not boring everyone to death. Like I tried, like I didn't want to just be like, you know, those videos where it's like, stick to this, stick that to this. You're just like, I just wanted to really show like just simple technical stuff that people can use so they can just get to the making, and also just try to make it interesting by showing all the different materials and what's possible. Like you can stick a lot of things together that you wouldn't think. I never would have thought I could stick all these things together, but I just kept doing it until it worked.